Hi, friends. In our time together today, I want us to think through and talk out loud in answer to a question that one of our friends asked um, that is really appropriate because ties in directly with a number of the conversations we've been having about breath pressure, tuning, tone quality, and all that stuff. And how some of that's dependent on the whistle, some of that's dependent on the musician. And anyway, Lydia N804, thank you for this great question. Kind of married that all together with this question of, and this is part of her question, but this is the core of what I want to talk about today. Do you feel whistles in higher price ranges are easier to play than cheaper ones, especially with respect to playing in tune? I'm going to do my best to dive right into this. However, the answer to this question is dependent upon so many different factors that I think we need to think through some of that. And I'm going to start off out of the gate and say, many of you have been around whistles and have more whistles and have played longer than I, and you have more knowledge about this. And so, and even if you don't have more time under your belt, you have knowledge about this, please comment in the notes to this video. So, do more expensive whistles play more easily, and particularly play in tune? And I really kind of want to address, even though she has it as a tuning question, I want to address that primarily as two separate issues because the playability speaks directly, because of a primary factor, speaks directly into the tuning. And so that's really important. So I want to answer it though right away. Let's answer the question. Are more expensive whistles, do more expensive whistles play more easily than inexpensive whistles? Often no. Let me add one. Do more expensive whistles often play better than inexpensive whistles? Often yes. Now the third one, and do more expensive whistles generally play in tune better than an inexpensive whistle? For the most part, yes. And when you throw all three of those together into a blender, you have some of the complexities and complications of why finding the whistle you want is a challenge, especially when you throw in elements that we're not talking about today, like tone quality and volume, some of those other factors we've talked about before. So I'm trying to limit us to ease of play, and particularly with a focus on tuning. So I want to hit the ease of play first. So I have an example because it's good to use. It's good to start off with an example. This is the Tony Dixon Polymer High D whistle. Now, this is the tunable version. The non-tunable version, well, is incredibly inexpensive, under 20 bucks. Probably pick it up for 13. This is maybe another 10 bucks more because it's tunable. It plays so easily. I think it's about the easiest to play inexpensive high D whistle. There are others. Clark Sweet Tone's very easy. And this is not the video for that, but this is an example. It plays well, it plays freely, it plays easily. You can't really push the lower octave, nor is the depth of tone there. And see, that's some of the differentiating points that we need to start thinking about. Because when you spend more money for a whistle, you're not just getting a whistle that maybe not plays more easily. You're not just getting one that plays in tune, but you're getting one that brings a complexity of tone into play. This is a McManus High D. Okay, that's just up to the second octave D. And when I'm playing this cost over, well, maybe 10 times what this costs. So you go buy at least 10 of these for every one of these. But the McManus brings a depth of tone. But is it easy to play? It took me a while. I'm turning so that I'm not just blasting into the mic because it's not a quiet whistle. So something's accomplished here that can't be accomplished here. Ease of playability and tuning is accomplished here. Range of dynamics, range of volume, range of expression, depth of tone exists here for 10 times the money. And okay, that's fine. Now, and so you get some differences. And then when I think about low whistles, I don't want to give some examples that I want to diss. I want to give some positive examples. I have some low whistles that that will play freely that I'm not a huge fan of, nor do they necessarily play in tune. Side comment here. I've read some people say, if you're playing by yourself, you just want the whistle to be in tune with itself. You don't really care about it being in tune overall. And if you're playing with other people, then you want to be able to tune it and have it in tune. And I have a bit of a hard time with that. Because if I'm playing an instrument and it's not even in tune with itself, I mean, even if it's in tune with itself, if it's out of tune, that really bugs my ears. So I think you want a whistle that just flat plays in tune. I don't mean plays flat, but it plays in tune. So breath pressure. I could just breathe into the diction, and I've got to do some forcing on this. Let me share a couple of quotes. Not quoting Roy McManus, but I emailed Roy McManus once about his whistles, and he said, well, you need to be careful because you have to learn to play them. You might not like it if you get it and you don't know how to play a whistle. He didn't just mean play up and down. He meant breath pressure and dynamics. I know Colin Goley said the same, and Joey, one of our a good friend in the community, shared with me some quotes. I've been having this conversation with a number of members of the community who are all becoming great friends, and so that's again why I wanted to dive into this. But Joey shared a quote from John Swain, and John Swain says, slightly greater pressure is required to get the upper part of the second register to speak cleanly. I love that phrase. So when I got my Howard Low D, I was able to play it reasonably quickly. And I loved the depth of tone, the ability to change volume, and I thought that was great. And I'm getting into the second octave, and I'm like around the G, and I'm like, oh, how? I can't play those notes. It took me a long while to learn to play all the way up to the top of the second octave because there are breath pressure requirements to learn to play a whistle well. Now, I hope you're already hearing how that impacts your ability to play a whistle in tune. You might grab a whistle and say, this thing stinks because I can't play it. I can't play it in tune. Well, a classic example is the MK Pro. It's here. It is the go-to whistle of go-to low D of a lot of folks because of tone quality, that sound, that traditional yet warm sound it brings to the market. folks at MK are going to tell you, if you get one of these, you're going to have to figure out the breath pressure requirements for that second octave. Around the F sharp in the second octave, you need to learn to add a lot more breath pressure to get this to play well. I've even had somebody tell me, and I really appreciate it, you probably ought to pull the slide out more, because when you get into, and this, I'm kind of transitioning to tuning here, when you get into the second octave, you're going to have to push it so hard it's going to blow sharp. So be willing to pull this out and control your breath in the first octave to keep it in tune, so that when you get to pushing in the second octave, you're actually playing it closer to in tune. Fascinating. And I found that with a lot of more expensive whistles that require you to play with breath pressure. That we're transitioning to tuning now. You need in a more expensive whistle, because it does so much more. It brings so much more to the table than an inexpensive whistle, from tone quality, from playability, from volume, that you have to really push it in the second octave. But the fact that you can push it is a great thing. You can play much more expressively, but that often means that you're going to have to learn to play the first and the second octave a little differently. I have another whistle here. Let's see. I'm gonna lean over here because I don't really want you to see it, because some of you will know what it is. This is a whistle. It's a high D, and I've never introduced this whistle, so I want it to remain anonymous. Please don't guess if you know. All right, I'm going over here for a minute because I don't want you to see it. All right, listen carefully. All right, I hope you heard the E and the A. Ooh, the whistle is not in tune with itself. And that is not an inexpensive whistle. And I'll never introduce it. Now, it doesn't mean that if I've not introduced a whistle that I don't like it. That's the most glaring example, that two of the notes in both the lower and the upper octave are just out of tune. I don't want to have to change my breath pressure to accommodate being able to play the E, and then the A, and then back it back down. I want to think, if I'm playing in a more expensive instrument, I use a set breath pressure for the most part in the lower octave. Then I use a certain breath pressure for about half of the second octave. And I use another breath pressure increasing some for the top of the second octave. And that's not unusual. And that is to enable you to play it well and to play it in tune. So inexpensive whistles should play pretty easily. I did a review of 10 inexpensive high D whistles, and I also did a review of some inexpensive low D whistles, and some of them you just can't play expressively. So you lose the ability to play expressively because there's not as much engineering and manufacturing and customization going in. So that's how you're getting a cheaper whistle for the most part. There are exceptions to the rule, and that's the Tony Dixon. This is not a comment on all Tony Dixons. This is a comment on this whistle. The Tony Dixon Polymer High D. The Carry Tenor Low D. You could play this expressively. It plays in tune, and a low D whistle, it's depending upon the exchange rate, it's around $62. And that's crazy amazing. You can play them in tune. And so this is again why I say listen to reviews. So it may take you a while to learn to play the whistle, that specific whistle, like the MK Pro or even my Howard. I've got a Carbony here. I'll talk about in a minute. But there aren't many whistles that combine the ability to play easily and expressively. That's when I'm transitioning. So I've got the Chieftain V5 here. This whistle's only a little over $200. You could play it expressively. You could play it easily. And it plays in tune. And you're not worried about being in tune, out of tune, lower. It plays so well. And it's tunable as well, unless you buy the non-tunable version. And I love the balanced volume top to bottom on that. It's brilliant, brilliant whistle. Phil Hardy, well done. I don't have a Colin Goldie whistle. If I had a Colin Goldie whistle, I'd be saying the same thing. I feel that way. I love my Howard, by the way. I feel that way about the Howard. Very consistent, but I really had to learn more how to play that second octave. The MK Pro is great, but there's a disparity between the volume of the lower and the volume in the second octave. So I wouldn't put the MK Pro in the exceptions. I will add the Carbony to the exceptions because there is a depth of tone, an ease of play. This is the close finger spacing. There's a depth of tone, ease of play, balanced volume, and in tune. Now, when you get to that, that's when the question of, do some really expensive whistles pull off both things of playability and playing in tune? Yes. But again, you need to be very careful because you could end up spending a lot of money on a whistle that you don't like the tone of. So you want one that plays easily and you want one that plays in tune. And then you add in, that we haven't done in this conversation really, the tone quality. You're narrowing down the whistles you're after to a very small subset of all the whistles available in the universe. So yes, to come back to the original question of, do you feel whistles in higher price ranges are easier to play than cheaper ones? I say no, actually. They aren't easier unless you're down to my exception category. And that exception category is not very big. For the most part, and again, this is, the MK Pro is the go-to for a lot of folks. And it's nothing against the MK Pro. There's no way in the world this is easier to play than a lot of less expensive whistles. This is a lot harder to play. But once you learn to play it, you'll be happy you learned to play it. Interesting. So now, with respect to tuning, the MK Pro is really good. But like I said, you're going to have to adjust the tuning so that when you have to push it, you're not playing it sharp in the second octave. But then you get into something like my Howard, the Chieftain, the Goldies, the Carbonies. Some of the, I'm not throwing in the whole mix of high D whistles in the interest of time. You really are getting something that plays expressively, freely, in tune, top to bottom. And that's really, really important. And I try and hit all these things when I do reviews, and we try and talk about all that. Anyway, man, what a long answer. My apologies, Lydia N804, but I thank you so much for this amazing question that really hits a lot of very important things for us. And I would love, again, I want you all to chime in. An inexpensive whistle may play more easily. May. It depends on engineering. Depends on tone quality. depends on required breath pressure. A less expensive whistle does not necessarily play in tune better than a more expensive whistle. But when you're combining all that, when you combine tone, playability, and tuning, then you're getting a narrow subset depending upon the tone you want. And you should be able, through listening to a lot of reviews, having conversations with people like me and our community and other folks, you should be able to narrow down the whistles you want based on some of that. Playability is often a learned issue on some of these more expensive whistles. And that's, again, why we say, if you want to start off with a whistle to learn to play, start off with something like the Cary Tenor that's very inexpensive. Start off with something like the Tony Dixon Polymer, because you just want to figure out how to play and then graduate to something else after you figure out some of those nuances on playing. But they won't necessarily help you with all the deep nuances of learning breath pressure. Whew. Anyway, my friends, I hope this has been a helpful conversation. Please, please, please comment. I need your comments. Our friends need your comments. If you know all this stuff, if this video has been helpful, please like it. Helps YouTube promote our community. And if you're just checking us out, please subscribe, because we're a lot of folks having a lot of fun learning our whistles. Until next time, this is Scott Shade. Happy whistling, friends.